Противник пытался сегодня наносить ночью удары по атомной электростанции.
556,000 people without electricity, meaning about 203,000 homes without heating, 28 power substations offline, 3 thermal power plants disabled, 14 missiles, 43 long-range drones, temperature minus 18 degrees Celsius and dropping. This is the largest coordinated strike on Russia's power grid since 2022. Electricity collapsed first, heating followed, water pumps stopped, rail signals failed, airports froze. Backup generators rolled out across multiple regions, including Moscow's outer energy ring. This is not an overload. This was an energy shutdown. One word in the comments before we continue. Stable or broken? Like, subscribe, and stay here. What comes next explains everything.
This was not a single strike. It was a layered operation executed in waves across distance, altitude, and infrastructure type. The first targets were high-voltage substations, the kind that do not power neighborhoods but bind entire regions together. When 28 substations went offline almost simultaneously, it fractured the grid before operators could reroute load. Then came the thermal plants. 3 thermal power stations were disabled within hours. As we've seen, in winter conditions, thermal plants do double duty: electricity and heat. When turbines shut down at minus 18 degrees Celsius, district heating systems lose circulation. Pipes freeze. Pressure builds. Damage becomes structural, not temporary. This is why 203,000 homes lost heating within minutes, not hours. The sequence was deliberate. Missiles and drones did not strike randomly. They targeted transformer yards, switchgear, and control buildings, the points that take months to replace, not days. High-voltage transformers are custom-built. Lead times stretch 12 to 18 months under normal conditions. Under sanctions, replacement is uncertain at best. The drone count matters here. 43 long-range drones were not meant to destroy everything. They were meant to overload air defenses, force radar activation, and expose gaps. Once air defense units engaged, missiles followed, 14 in total, aimed at fixed known infrastructure coordinates. This was a cost-asymmetric strike, because a single drone costs thousands, a single transformer costs millions. The economics favor the attacker, especially when the defender is already stretched across thousands of kilometers of front line. And the effects did not stop at electricity. When substations fail, water pumping stations lose pressure. When pressure drops, municipal water systems shut down to prevent pipe collapse. When water stops, hospitals switch to internal reserves. Elevators fail. Mobile towers lose backup power. Internet nodes drop. Rail systems felt it next. Signal systems depend on uninterrupted power. When voltage drops, trains slow or stop automatically. Cargo schedules collapse. Commuter lines stall. The ripple effect spreads beyond the blackout zone within minutes. Airports froze because aviation does not tolerate uncertainty. Runway lighting, radar feeds, de-icing systems, fuel pumps, all power dependent. Even brief outages force full shutdowns under safety protocols. That is why civil aviation halted, even where snow alone would not have justified it. What makes this strike different from earlier attacks is location. These outages were not confined to border regions or occupied territory. They reached into the outer energy ring, feeding Moscow, the symbolic center of political control. That is a red line Russia assumed was protected. It was not. This was not an accident of weather or aging infrastructure. The timing, sequencing, and target selection show intent. The grid was not overwhelmed, it was cut. And once you see how fast a modern city goes dark, the question stops being, how did this happen? And becomes, how often can it happen again? There is no desire for a repeat of the incident. The real damage was not measured in darkness or expectation. It was measured in time, faith, and even the future. In winter, power outages are survivable only if restoration is fast. What made this strike effective is that it targeted components that cannot be restarted quickly, no matter how many crews you deploy. High-voltage transformers do not exist in warehouses. Each unit weighs 200 to 400 tons, is custom calibrated to the grid it serves, and requires weeks just to transport. Under sanctions, Russia cannot import Western replacements. Domestic production capacity covers less than 40% of annual demand even in peacetime. That means every transformer destroyed is not a blackout. It is a long-term degradation. Thermal plants face the same reality. When turbines cool suddenly in sub-zero conditions, metal contracts unevenly. Microfractures form, bearings seize. Restarting becomes a mechanical risk. Engineers often choose to keep plants offline rather than cause permanent damage. That is why outages persisted even after drone activity stopped. Then there is manpower. Russia's energy sector is already understaffed. Since 2022, tens of thousands of skilled technicians, electricians, and maintenance engineers have been mobilized, fled abroad, or shifted to military production. According to industry estimates, staffing levels in regional grid maintenance teams are down 25 to 30% compared to pre-war levels. So when 28 substations failed at once, there were not enough qualified crews to respond simultaneously. This creates a cascading delay. One site waits while another is prioritized. Temporary fixes replace permanent repairs. Load is rerouted through already stressed lines. Each workaround increases the probability of secondary failures. This is how outages spread without additional strikes. Fuel logistics worsened the problem. Backup generators require diesel. Fuel deliveries require roads, power, and functioning dispatch systems. In several regions, emergency generators ran intermittently because refueling schedules broke down. Hospitals were forced to ration non-essential power. Mobile base stations shut off overnight to conserve reserves. The cold amplified everything. At -18 degrees Celsius, district heating systems operate near maximum pressure. When pumps stop, water freezes quickly. Frozen pipes burst internally, often invisibly. Even after electricity returns, heating does not. Repairs require opening walls, draining systems, and replacing sections, work that takes weeks, not hours. This is why the phrase, temporary outage, stopped being accurate within the first night. The psychological effect followed immediately. In Russian cities, winter has always been the state's final argument. Endure hardship now, stability later. That contract depends on one assumption, that the government can keep basic services running no matter what. This time, it could not. Videos of dark apartment blocks, frozen stairwells, and improvised heating spread faster than official statements. People were not watching a distant war, they were feeling it in their own homes. And critically, the strikes forced a strategic dilemma: protect the front or protect the grid. Air defense systems used to shield substations are the same systems needed to intercept missiles near the battlefield. Every unit pulled back to defend energy infrastructure weakens frontline coverage. Every unit kept at the front leaves cities exposed. There is no surplus. This is why the attack matters beyond the blackout. It did not just damage infrastructure, it forced trade-offs inside Russia's war machine. Trade-offs that cannot be hidden, postponed, or explained away by weather reports. The grid failed because it was asked to survive a war it was never designed to fight. And now the question is not whether Russia can restore power. The question is how many times it can afford to do it again. What happened to Russia's power grid was not an accident of timing. It was a test, and the result was clear. Ukraine demonstrated that it no longer needs to overwhelm Russian defenses everywhere. It only needs to hit precisely, repeatedly, and at the right nodes. The places where failure spreads faster than repair. Energy infrastructure is one of those nodes. Russia's grid was built for redundancy in theory, not in practice. It assumes stable peacetime maintenance, predictable loads, and uninterrupted logistics. None of those conditions exist anymore. Sanctions have stripped away spare parts. Mobilization has hollowed out technical expertise. Wartime consumption has pushed systems beyond safe margins. That means every successful strike compounds the next. After this attack, Russian planners face a shrinking menu of options. They can harden energy infrastructure, but that requires diverting air defense systems, radar coverage, and trained personnel away from the front. That weakens battlefield survivability. They can accept recurring blackouts, But that transfers the war directly into civilian life, undermining the narrative that Moscow remains insulated from the conflict. Or they can attempt rapid repairs, which drains budget reserves already strained by falling energy revenues and rising military costs. None of these choices are good, and none of them scale. This is why the strike matters more than the numbers suggest. 556,000 people without electricity is severe. 203,000 homes without heating are dangerous. But the deeper impact is structural. Every outage forces the state to expose itself, dispatching generators, issuing emergency decrees, rationing power, explaining delays. Each response is visible. Each response contradicts the image of control. And once control is questioned, fear replaces compliance. This is the logic Ukraine is exploiting. It is not trying to destroy Russia's grid outright. That would require sustained mass strikes. Instead, it is demonstrating vulnerability, again and again, until the cost of defense exceeds the cost of offense. A drone costs thousands, an interceptor costs hundreds of thousands. A transformer costs millions and months. This asymmetry favors persistence. It also forces Russia into strategic overextension. The more territory and infrastructure it tries to defend, the thinner its defenses become everywhere else. Meanwhile, winter is not finished. Forecast models show sustained sub-zero temperatures across much of western Russia for weeks. Each additional outage increases the probability of irreversible damage. Burst pipes, cracked turbines, failed relays that cannot be replaced quickly. This is how temporary crises become permanent degradation. For years, the Kremlin promised that war would not touch daily life in the capital, that Moscow would remain normal, warm, lit, and moving, no matter what happened elsewhere. That promise has now been broken. And once broken, it cannot be repaired with press statements or reassurances, because the next blackout will not be measured in megawatts. It will be measured in trust. What happened this week was not a one-off strike. It was a warning shot. Russia's power grid did not fail because of snow or bad luck. It failed because a system built for peacetime is being forced to absorb a war it cannot sustain. Each blackout exposes the same truth. The state can still launch missiles abroad, but it struggles to keep the lights on at home. This is how modern wars shift. Not through sudden collapse, but through repeated stress, until repair becomes impossible and confidence evaporates. Winter is far from over. Air defenses are finite. Repair crews are exhausted. Spare parts are scarce. And every successful strike makes the next one cheaper, faster, and harder to stop. The Kremlin can promise stability. It can deny vulnerability. But the grid doesn't lie. Neither does the cold. So the real question now isn't whether Russia can restore power today. It's whether it can protect its cities tomorrow, and the day after that, without sacrificing the war it chose to fight. Because once darkness becomes normal, control never fully returns.